1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Mission Control, Peralta Design's podcast on all things branding and digital marketing. Since 2008, Peralta Design has launched hundreds of brands with award-winning identities and websites. Join our hosts Ramon and Jorge as they use decades of combined experience to tackle topics with past clients, industry partners, and the rest of the PD crew. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode of Mission Control.
Hey everybody, welcome to Mission Control. This is Ramon Peralta from Peralta Design, and we launch brands. And Mission Control's Peralta Design's podcast about everything entrepreneurship, marketing, branding, technology. And I'm super excited to have this special guest with me today. He's a dear frat brother, a dear social media friend. I think we go back to like when Facebook first started, following each other and working on a bunch of projects together. This guy makes entrepreneurship look like it's fun because he totally crushes the myth that you have to pick one thing when you're a kid about what you want to do when you grow up. He's the opposite of that. He writes things for money, which I love. That's his Facebook profile, and he's a published author, speaker, serial entrepreneur. Can't wait to dive in. Please help me welcome Brother Lawrence Ross. Welcome to the show.
I am so pleased to see this. This is so dope. I can't even tell you how much I'm proud of you on this.
Hey, thank you, man. Thank you. And I'm proud of you. And just, I mean, you're in the Metaphor Club, which is a venture that, we could dive right in. Tell me what it's been like, because you opened this right before COVID hit as a co-working space.
Right. So we've been open for 2 years now.
Okay.
So the Metaphor Club. Well, let me give you a little bit of background.
Yeah.
So for your viewers and your listeners, I'm a writer, and I've been writing for about the last 25 years or so. Mm-hmm. And so I've written a number of books, but the most popular ones are books called The Divine Nine: History of African American Fraternities and Sororities, and Blackballed: The Black and White Politics of Race on America's Campuses. Those are kind of like campus college stalwarts. And so I was looking for a writing space. Like most writers, we kind of cobble together space, and we would go to, Magic Johnson used to own a Starbucks. Right. Even though he hasn't really owned it for like a decade, the branding was so great that people continued to call it Magic Starbucks and everything. So, but what was happening was that they were closing those down. And it was also around a time where those two young brothers in Philadelphia were taken out of the Starbucks.
Right.
So
that caused that whole shutdown for a day where they did racial sensitivity training and so forth.
Right. Starbucks trying to do racial sensitivity, that didn't really work and everything. So I was actually in Philly doing book signing at Mark Lamont Hill's Uncle Bobby's Cafe in Germantown and out in Philly. And I loved it. It was local. It was a cafe. It had kind of the ambiance that you need as a writer. You kind of need eclectic space as a writer. Right. And so I got back to LA, and I thought to myself, well, there's really no writing spaces out here that are Black intentional, meaning that you walk in, you don't feel like you're, going to somebody else's space and trying to carve that out. Right. And I thought to myself, well, it'd be great to have a space that, you walk in as a writer or academic or, a business person, doesn't really matter. And you can feel that you are at home. Right. And so I got with 3 other frat brothers, and we all basically grew up here in LA. And it was important for that because we wanted to let people know, particularly where this space is located. It's on Crenshaw Boulevard. And for any of you all who have never been to Los Angeles, but and you have watched Insecure, we are in the heart of Insecure land, right? We can walk around. We can walk about half a block away to We Got Y'all, to the We Got Y'all headquarters. So we created this space right in the heart of Black LA, and this space.
And was that a decision to reinvest back? Because we hear about gentrification all the time, and you guys could have bought a building anywhere, but you chose here. What was that thought process?
Yeah, you nailed it. Because the area that we're in particular has been kind of the hub of gentrification. And we're, in terms of a market, we're kind of right at the nexus of upper middle class, solidly middle class, and then, working class. Mm-hmm. So we are about a block and a half from where Boys in the Hood took place. right where, Insecure takes place, which is, kind of like the Lamert Park area. And then the upper middle class is kind of like the Baldwin Hills area, which is right above us. And so we're in a perfect spot. And we also wanted to make a statement because we knew at some point in time, someone else was going to do it. It was because we have kind of confluence of new rail coming through here that's been, developed and is coming through our neighborhood for the first time. And we wanted to do that. And the biggest part was we also wanted to make a statement that we are who we are, not in spite of Crenshaw Boulevard, but because of Crenshaw Boulevard.
Right.
Yeah. And so, so we created this and it became an instant hit. So, all of our members come through from Hollywood writers to the regular person who just is working on their entrepreneurship. And so what's great about the space is that it's set up to be almost like a market research whenever you need it.
Right.
So you're able to. We've had this one sister in particular who owns a cleaning service, and it's called Pop-Up Cleanup. And when she first came, it was just in concept. And so what she would do is she was like, hey, I'm trying to get this contract and, market it. And then suddenly she was getting consultation from a professor over here and from a business person over here.
It's like your own little focus group.
It's an immediate focus group.
Yeah.
And it works for everything. And so what's great about it is that the space is different than, say, for example, a WeWorks,
Right.
Basically it becomes an organic space, and everybody kind of throws that word around, authenticity and organic.
Yeah.
Well, this one really is. And that's the genius of the space. And then we also we do content also. So we shrink access and privilege. And, the idea is that we have a great contact book so we can bring in all of Black Hollywood.
Gotcha.
We can bring in
the resources. You have access to resources as part of the membership.
Yeah. Basically, and we wanted to make it democratized, so that it wouldn't be on high. The person's up here and you're over here. You listen, but you didn't get to touch. You didn't get to ask. And so everything that we do is based upon the idea that everyone has equal access.
Yeah.
And so when you have that equal access, well, the value is inherent in the space.
Right. I love what you said. What stood out to me was we're who we are, not despite of, but because of. And as an agency, we're literally having those conversations ourselves because lately we've been getting these opportunities. We lost one recently that had to do with equity and parity. It was a bunch of rich folks that want to do something, and we lost.
Throwing money at you too.
Right. And we lost to an agency that puts like culture first, like on their homepage. And we've always been, we're who we are, despite being Black and brown, we're the best agency. But now we're seeing this thing where it's like, we're the best because of our diverse thought, and our diversity is a strength. And we're seeing, it's kind of the soup du jour, and I don't want to derail the conversation, but we're seeing agencies kind of putting that like on Front Street now, because you have a lot of folks that are trying to say, like, what can I do to solve this? I want to throw some money at this.
Well, here's I remember, so in grad school, I went to UCLA for grad school. And while I was at UCLA, I worked for this company called Iconoculture. And Iconoculture was nothing but a consumer trends company that used qualitative versus quantitative. Our goal was basically for advertisers, for corporations to kind of tell the story, of what the demographic was doing. We used Maslow's, whole, pyramid in terms of, the desires and everything else like that. And so, everybody can probably use that. But the whole point was basically, I was supposed to be kind of like the John Nash of the African-American demographic. You know what I mean? I should be able to see all of what was going on. And the methodology was dope enough that I can actually see it, in terms of, I can see stuff way ahead of everybody else. And it helps, for example, like when I wrote the book on campus racism, no one was talking about it. I recognized it, observations, and boom, guess what? My book comes out right during the time. But a lot of these companies are kind of reactive. And so they have no clue as to the communities in which they know that they have to, address.
Right.
And so that's the reason why you're seeing a switch. A perfect example. When I was working at Iconoculture, we worked with Mars Company, right? And Mars is,
Mars, like M&M peanuts and stuff like that?
they have that, but they also have like Uncle Ben's rice.
Okay.
So Mars is pretty much kind of like the whole conglomerate of everything. And they came to me, and this is 2006 or so, right? And they said, hey, we want to, reimagine Uncle Ben's rice, right? We got a problematic product. We don't want to get rid of it because it's an icon. Same time, it's got brand value. You can't buy 100 something years worth of brand value. You're just not going to throw it off. What can you come up with? Now, see the difference between then and now. So here is my I'll give it to you really quick. So I said, okay, I got to reimagine it. This is great. This is a puzzle. This is solving a problem. So I said, great. What we're going to do is we're going to give Uncle Ben, first of all, a last name. Because one of the things that we have to do is break the disrespect. Right. Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima are designed to be pejoratives based upon the idea, I don't have to give you respect as a Mr. or Mrs. So we're going to give him a last name. Now we're going to switch him from, instead of being tied to the plantation, he's going to be located, his backstory is going to be located in South Carolina, in the Gullah Islands, in the Gullah community, right? Yep. So now we've reclaimed him, okay? He's a person with respect. He's an elder. He has a rice plantation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring in someone who at the time was kind of big, G. Garvin. He had a show on BET. We're going to bring him in. That's the nephew. That provides the nephew and the uncle. And we're going to tell the story of Uncle Ben showing the nephew, G. Garvin, how to create these various
legacy, there's family.
Legacy, right, authenticity, right. Family, heritage, all the beautiful words associated with community. We're going to show them at coming all together at an Easter or Thanksgiving, and we see all the product right there, and everyone is going to laud the respected Uncle Ben for, teaching the G. Garvin. And you can spin that off digitally and everything else like that. I said all that. They loved it. Great. But they were like, what we're going to do? We're going to turn Uncle Ben into a cartoon. And I was like, you're not. And guess what? They did. They turned him into the board of the chairman of the board. That was the name of their campaign, and got immediately panned. And I was like, hey, guess what they're doing now? They're having to reconcile Uncle Ben's 14 years later because they weren't listening. So I would say, now I understand your POV and your perspective. And I think what you're going to find are brand, folks who work with brands who aren't necessarily good, who are going to recognize it and say, oh, this is how we can get the money.
Right, exactly.
We can put this all out there, and they're going to see all this, and, oh, yeah, okay, they can solve our problem. I think just a little, in terms of a tweak for Peralta Design, is not that you want to put this up ahead. You just need to let them know, oh, that was inherent in terms of what we do anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean? In terms of, yeah, we're excellent, but I want to make sure that you understand we roll in. This is part of our internal strategy. So we don't have to throw this out as being, hey, we're black. Hey, we got the Latinx market. You don't have to throw it out like that. And I think what happens, because I've having dealt with so many brands on so many different types of projects, they're literally clueless about, even when they hire DI folks, they're literally clueless of how they fit into, a community that they usually have like a top level, type of relationship with. Right. They know they don't want to offend anybody. Exactly. That's the one thing, because the offending people mean that you got to come up with a word salad apology, and then your brand kind of gets a hit.
It's financial hit, yeah.
Yeah, you get a financial hit, you get the bad PR, and but so they're going to come more and more to you. Right. But I think they're going to be coming more and more to you from a deeper sense of, how do we get past the superficial and go directly to eradicating the problem. Right.
And for us, it's like we have a lot of first gen millennials on our team. So, if somebody came to us and said, hey, we want to hit the South American market, that's not, we're born here, but we still have parents who are immigrants. So that's an entirely different kind of perspective and view.
And they have no clue to that.
Right. They're like, your name's Ramon, so,
Yeah, and I'm like, there's a difference between being Cuban, Dominican, and Puerto Rican. But they're like, hey, you speak Spanish? And it reminds me of my sister. My sister speaks fluent Spanish, right? Mm. And all the Dominicans think that she's Dominican, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they always think that she's basically that she's renouncing her land. And she's like, I'm from Inglewood, California. And so they all like, oh, no, you're just renouncing, who you truly are.
Man.
But it's funny that, when you see this, I think you have to always have two different perspectives.
Right.
You have to be in their head, which you, of course, you've done this a billion times in terms of your client, getting to your client's head and understanding where they truly are. Right. And then knowing, and then this is the important thing, like you did, truly understanding what you can do and what you can't.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
they will have my golden rule is always only talk about stuff that I'm an expert in.
Exactly.
Meaning that you will never find me on a panel. Like, for example, I talk about, I researched campus racism. It took me about a good 3-4 years of researching and everything. And a lot of that actually translates into the corporate market. So what happens now is that corporations are now coming to me and asking me for me to do the lecture that I normally do on college campuses for their employees. I did that for the
Take us back a bit, because entrepreneurs also don't follow this linear path. It goes all over the place. For you, where did this begin for you? Like, when did you realize I gotta become an expert on race, or was it by accident?
Well, let me go back to where it became, an entrepreneur. That will make you the easiest thing. Right. My grandfather name was the epitome of the ADHD entrepreneur, right? So my grandfather was a chef and a cook, and, he worked in, various places, and my grandfather was a bigger than life personality. We called him Popeye, right? Excuse me. And I was about 8 years old. Now, this is 8 years old, so I'm 54 right now. So that was 1974. And he would hire his grandchildren to work weddings, right? And so in 1974, all I did was basically learn how to do everything for catering, and then I got paid $50. Okay.
That's
now in it's basically the equivalent of like $500 today. And so once I got that first, and my parents actually balked. My parents said, "Why are you paying this 8-year-old $50?" He said, "Well, because he did $50 worth of work." And so I don't care if he's 8 years old or 28 years old, he's getting paid.
Good on him, man. Yeah.
Oh, so when I put that $50 in,
little did he know what he was actually like planting the seed in you.
He had no idea. So from that point on, it was funny because my parents and then my aunts and uncles were kind of that first generation of kind of post-civil rights, middle management, working at corporations and utilities. So working for AT&T and Pat Bell and, those type of companies, which were great, stable companies. But that was never, once I had a taste of, working, as an entrepreneur and understanding that this was something that was easy to understand and to dissect, and you can match it with the things that you learn, in school and your observations. Well, it becomes fun to be able to figure out the structures of a particular business, not just the business itself, but what is the actual strategy, for the business. And so I paid my way through Berkeley with Avalon Catering. I hired tons of tons of people today who owe me based upon and I did it. This is the funny part. So I created a catering service simply because I got tired of my sons eating hot dogs every day. And I was like, I have to teach you how to make some regular food. And because I tell you, I'm a grandson of caterers.
Right.
And so then I didn't have money. So one thing I decided to do, I was going to, none of the frat knew how to cook, but they wanted to take out the girlfriends. And so I said, I'm going to do this thing called sweetheart dinners, and where I will come into your crib, I'll cook the dinner, you all go to the movies. When you get back, it'll all be laid out, and she can be like, oh my God. All right. Yes. It was, if I would have had an app at the time or any social, a cell phone at the time, this is in the 80s, I killed. So then that kind of begot, all the things. And I got a contract. I literally did not know what a RFP was. Had no clue. And somebody came up to me and said, hey, man, they're looking for somebody to cater the back of the house and the front of the house, the concessions. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I went there. It was a Cal's like performing arts center. Mm. I have no idea why they gave me that contract. I had no idea what I was doing. And so, but I ended up, I had a monopoly on. But
you understood your profit margins and you had suppliers and.
I had suppliers, I would go to the fancy food conventions. Mm-hmm. And so, all of those things, the nuts and bolts were always easy for me to be able to figure out what was how to set it up. Yeah. The harder thing was like most entrepreneurs, particularly most minority entrepreneurs, is that how do you get the financing to be able to do this?
Right.
The one great thing about catering is that you get your money in advance. So you were able to create your own, cash flow. Yeah. So
what did your branding consist of? Were you operating like with a business card? Did you have flyers or?
So my branding consisted of, I had this really dope menu. It was high class, high quality menu. You could just go through it. It looked like you were going to a restaurant. And so this menu was so good. People were like, I'm keeping the menu after you do this. Right. And so I had all my pricing, and I think I had based it upon a menu from a catering service in San Francisco. And I was like, hey, this is San Francisco rates. This is going to be Berkeley, Oakland rates, right? And I set it all up. I knew how to cook it all. I had my own stuff. And then I got really lucky because there was in the Berkeley area, there was like the beginning of shared kitchens. Mm-hmm. And so I could, share a kitchen and I didn't have to pay for the overall expense.
Like a commercial kitchen.
Commercial kitchen, yeah. And so you'd have like a baker in the morning, and then, you rent out space. So it was great. So, I did that all the way for 7 years, into the point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore because I was just too damn tired. But in the meantime, I was, when I was catering, I always look for another opportunity for something. So I remember when Rap Chips, I don't know, Rap Chips are still out. It was like Master P would be on your barbecue potato chips. And I remember I just called them because he was like not even email. I called him and said, hey, I'm in the Oakland area. You guys aren't here. I'd like to be a distributor. They sent me 50 boxes of Rap Chips. So I was at my
were you selling them out of your car, or you just brought them with you?
I just put them in my car. I had a 1975 International Harvester Scout. Okay, so and that my wife called Jethro. And so
the Scout is like a Blazer, isn't it? Like
right, it's exactly like a Blazer. Yeah. And so my wife called it Jethro. She loves that name. And so we would take the boxes of the Rap Chips, put them in the back, and then I would just go from liquor store to liquor store, going, hey, can I get like an end cap? Put this stuff over here, and some would say yes, some would say no. But what the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship, I always try to tell people, is that really a lot of times people will say, well, you have to be born to be an entrepreneur. And I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that you have to have an overall understanding of what the strategy is. If you just have a tactic, and this is kind of like the thing that you learn through entrepreneurship that kind of resonates through life, right? I don't care if it's, how, we've both been married for, you've been married for how long?
28 years.
Joyce, we're married the same amount of time.
Yeah.
The class of 1992.
Exactly.
So in order to have a wonderful marriage and happy marriage, you have to have a strategy to make sure you're constantly understanding what the strategy is. Your goal is to make your wife happy, and fulfilled. Same thing happens with entrepreneurship. You have to be able to say, what is the strategy of this? It's not just simply making money. Mm-hmm. It's about, how do I build the reputation, the brand? How will other people think about what is the service that I'm providing? Why am I providing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
What else can I sell to them?
What else can I sell that actually fits the story?
Right.
Because a lot of times what will happen is that people will have an opportunity to sell something that's disconnected from their brand.
Right.
And the minute that you sell something that's disconnected from your brand, people go, that doesn't make any sense. Right. And you can see that a lot of times, like when McDonald's will sometimes decide that, they'll just lose their minds and
they'll sell a burrito or something.
Right. Yeah, or pizza. And you're like, and people go, Why would I buy? Or like when Burger King started, they were going to sell tacos.
Right.
And people were like, I'm not eating a taco from Burger King. I eat burgers at Burger King. And so entrepreneurship really, and then this is, I think it's why it's so great to be a writer. Because if you're a writer, entrepreneurship is basically a part of it. So for, my writing, I'm one of those few people. This is where I tell people it's a little bit, I don't know whether or not that path is easy to follow. But one of the things that I did with my writing was to amplify my writing by lecturing on college campuses, tied to it. And it's not really, I always I'm hesitant about saying, hey, yeah, you can go ahead and do that. It's really a skill set that's very particular. Right. And so, but I kind of have that part nailed. So, I've had that, the entrepreneurship of the writing, you don't stop there. What else can you do to extend the brand, extend the product?
Yeah, it's self-promotion in a way, and you're monetizing. Now you've turned a writing piece into a speaking engagement.
Boom, bingo. And what you're doing, what you have to also do is you're giving basically a value added. Right. Because what you're doing is that anyone could, this is why a lot of this fails. For example, you'll watch a C-SPAN and you'll have an author who has a book and I'm interested in this book, right? And then when they get up there, the only thing they do is talk about that book. Right. And you're like, well, hell, I could have just bought your book. I didn't get anything extra.
Or they read an excerpt out of it or something like that. Where it's like,
and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I can read, you've just done it in your voice, right? And so the point is you're supposed to think to yourself, how do I take what I have as a product and then extend it to where I'm providing even more value? Yeah. So I'm providing, it's kind of like, Bravo does it, for example. Bravo will have like the Real Housewives of Atlanta. And then they'll have a show right afterwards where they bring in the people. So you have a one-on-one discussion and talk beyond. Mm-hmm. And when you're able to do that, then you're enhancing both parts of your brand. And so, in terms of, how I look at it, I always look at what is the core that I'm looking to do. Mm-hmm. How does it provide value? Why would someone want, great ideas are great, but if it doesn't provide value, it has no reason to be in the marketplace.
Right. And you're speaking our language. When we do the digital strategies, we would consider your book like the long form content, and then you could chop that up and disperse it into short form that can be on a blog, or it could be a meme, or it could be a speaking engagement, or it could be a 30-second video, but it all started
tied up with SEO.
Exactly.
And guess what? Boom.
Exactly.
If you chop it up, beautifully, and you tie it all up to where a person goes and they put in, campus racism, or a news story comes up, it will pop up. And guess what? They have rich content left and right that they can point to that then enhances your brand as the expert in this. There may be other people, but you have these various aspects of content. That's the reason why digital is great.
It is. And let's this is something I've been wanting to ask you is when did you, because entrepreneurship also is about being okay with risk and going to sleep at night with risk and a lot of responsibility. And not everybody is cut out for that, but you also have a gift. I mean, you're not just a businessman. The gift of writing and that creativity, because when I hear you share about your process, it's very similar to like when I create a painting or I'm working on a design, like I can't be bothered. I'm in the zone. I'm pulling from the ether. Like at what age did you feel like you had a gift for writing?
So I had gone to Berkeley to be a writer. My degree's in history, but I knew there was going to be a combination of history and writing. So I knew that had been the thing since like sixth grade. I was kind of predestined to do that. In the exact same, which is hilarious to watch because my son is a senior at the Art Center College of Design. Right. And we knew since kindergarten that this child was going to get a BA in something dealing with art, right? And so I knew I was going to be writing. I really didn't have the opportunity to. That was kind of the big thing. And when I decided to stop catering, it was just simply because I was just tired of having, cooking and all the rest of the stuff. We decided to move down to Los Angeles, back to where I'm from, because my wife got a job at A&M Records. And once we did that, I was thinking to myself, well, do I want to reestablish the catering service in LA? Or I'd had enough of it. And I was like, well, let me just take the opportunity to write. And what was funny, this is how my life goes. I decided that I was going to write some free articles for the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which is the black kind of wire service. I don't know if they still exist, but they were at the point in time. The ones that, basically would go out to all the black newspapers, LA Sentinel, things like that.
Kind of like the Black Reuters or something like that.
Exactly. And my column, this was in the mid 90s, was explaining the internet. And the black web, explaining the internet. So two things occurred.
Is this like Black Planet times? Or?
Oh, no. I'm about to get to you before that. Okay. Let me get to you before that, because it's a combination of the two things, right? Yeah. So I come back down here. I get with one of my buddies who went to Berkeley with me, but also went to high school with me. One of my best friends, and we make a decision in 1995. I come down, and he's an electrical engineer. And right before I come down to LA, he says, "Hey man, can you do me a favor? Go to Radio Shack and pick up a modem," right? And I was like, "What's a modem?" He was like, "Pick up a modem, and it's gonna be a 2800 baud modem, right? I can literally tie a can and string and send it to you, and faster." So we were like amazed. Okay, wow, we can.
There was a 14.4, so the 28 was like the fast one, I think.
Oh yeah. Because I remember we got to 52. I was like, wow, we are rocking and rolling. So they were putting 28s in the computer. That's by that time. This was an external one, right? So I was sitting up, and so we were going back and forth. We were just playing with it, right? We were on bulletin boards. So I get back down to LA, and I'm starting to write. And then we start doing some research, of course, like we always do. And I said, "Hey, you know what we should do? We should open up ISP." Okay, because no one really had any ISP, particularly here in LA. And so I was still writing, these free articles, and I had to write for our bulletin board. Our bulletin board was called RBG Online, Red, Black, and Green Online. And Brian Jackson, right?
Yeah.
So Brian Jackson was our very first customer. So he was calling full rate from the East Coast long distance charges to us, and he would call regularly, right? And so we had internet. We had a bank of 52 baud modems. I have at least 200. People could come in. So we could have approximately 125 simultaneous users of our service. So we thought we were going to be the next America Online. So I'm still writing.
Net zero
Yeah. So we go to the Black Expo out here. We're passing out, RBG. We get a little blurb in Black Enterprise, which back in the day.
Well, this is a big deal. I mean, a Black ISP, like on the verge of the internet, is a pretty big deal.
It was a big deal. Black Enterprise, the king of confirmation that you had done something. Right. And then I just remember reading a newspaper article. They said the telephone companies are going to start getting into the internet. And I literally, the next day, listed our whole stuff for sale. I was like, we cannot compete. So we sold everything. The wall, yeah. Oh, the writing was on the wall. So we sold everything. We made back our money, which was great. Okay,
good.
But at that point in time, I was like, okay, I'm going to do full scale writing. And luckily, I stumbled into one of our frat brothers, a brother named Daryl James, owned at the time a magazine called Rap Sheet. And he had seen some of my writing. And instead of just being hired as a writer, he was like, "Hey, would you like to be a managing editor?" I was like, "Sure." I had no idea what a managing editor was. And so I worked for him for 2 years. And then I worked for a newspaper called the LA Independent Newspapers for 3. And in between working for Daryl and working for the LA Independent Newspapers, I began thinking about writing books. And one of my buddies from Berkeley had just signed a deal. And I was working on some articles for the weekend, and I just so happened to be up, and C-SPAN, this was before C-SPAN had book TV, and C-SPAN was doing 72 hours of the book industry. Like, they covered everything. And I was like, being obsessive like I am, I was like, I'm watching all 72 hours. So I watched everything about it. So then I got with my boy, Michael Datcher. I said, "Hey man, I want to write a book on African-American fraternities and sororities." And he was like, "Oh yeah, let's go meet and I'll tell you all about it." So all of his information matched. I sent out a query letter to the first agent that I saw in a book, who was based out of Atlanta. She accepted me. That never happens. And then I wrote a book proposal. It was rejected everywhere for the Divine Nine. It was rejected everywhere. She went back. She sent it to a woman named Karen Thomas, who told us on a Friday, don't send it out anywhere else. We'll buy it. And the reason why, Karen is an AKA. And Karen was like, oh, I already know I have a hit on the hand. And the rest is history.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Why were you writing for free, though? Go back to that. Is that for exposure?
Exposure, and I usually tell people the only thing that people die of exposure, in terms of, so I don't really recommend it. But, in terms of at the time, in terms of the landscape at the time, exposure, your writing could only get into a newspaper. There wasn't the internet.
Yeah, you couldn't just post your own blog like you can do now.
Right.
You had to submit and get approved and.
Right. And that was going through all the gateways. Right. And also the other thing, the currency of the day were clips. The only thing, they don't even do this anymore, but you would just clip out your, if you were going in for an interview for anywhere as a writer, what you would bring is your book. It would be the same thing as like your design portfolio. Right. Yeah. And it would be the same thing. So writing for free meant you got a clip, which meant that, you could actually say, okay, yes, this was
published.
Right. I'm published. This was in 50 newspapers. I have a regular, I could quantify it, but I have a regular readership. They keep asking for more,
right.
And then as you got more clips, then suddenly you kind of pass that, that rubric of being able to say, I am a published writer.
Right.
Today you can do that, and it's all legitimate, being on Medium or doing a blog. All those are wonderful ways to get out there.
Right. Now let's talk about some of, because you and I worked briefly on the Good Reverend many years ago, when I was leaving the employment of Walker Digital and starting PD.
Right.
You recently did Casuals. Has there been an affinity towards dabbling with graphic novels and comic strips and so forth? So what I'm able to do. Well, let me put it this way. I always have a mindset that if I have an idea that I can think all the way through, this is not just a spur of the moment idea, but it's an idea that I can think all the way through to do it. Never, ever stop yourself from doing it. So one of the things that I did, I kind of began with working with the griot. I had this idea of there were no black-centered editorial cartoons on a weekly basis. And so the editor from the griot loved the idea. And so what I was doing, I was making kind of the same satirical, critiques. And I had gotten with a guy locally to draw them, and they really worked well. They were very popular. And from there, I began thinking to myself, well, there might be other ways to tell some of my stories. Mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed, for example, my master's degree is from UCLA Film School. And at the time, UCLA Film School was maybe still today, pretty much white, right? And so what does that mean? Well, it means that, say, for example, if you write something, right? And let's say I write something that has a reference to Boys in the Hood, and it's funny, right? I write this and then they say it will go right over their head, right? But in the meantime, if they have something to where, dealing with a horror film that I have never seen in my life, instantly translates, right? So I had a lot of that when I was at UCLA, and there were scripts that I didn't know what to do with. So one of the things I recognized was my son, who has purchased every single manga book on the face of this earth. Okay. And I'm sitting up here watching him. I'm like, obviously they're successful. And so, because he has a wall full of Naruto and Bleach and all the rest of them. And I, by the way, have no idea what's in them. I just know that he has 1 billion copies of them. Yeah. And so I was like, well, it would be dope to take a story that I had, which was a story of women empowered, but not sexualized. Mm-hmm. They can be sexy, but they were not leading with their sexuality. Right. And and I'm a feminist by nature. My whole thing is about the empowerment of women to be able to do like the same thing I would talk about race or ethnicity. Break those barriers so we can see the best of who we are. And so
I created this graphic novel called The Casuals, and I put a pretty penny into it, and everybody
the
loved
production quality was dope. It was top notch.
Thank you so much. And it was like it literally was an international kind of, come together. Again, this is one of those things where you have to do your research and trying to figure out how do you make this happen. Yeah. So I had inkers from Ireland, and the person who drew it was from Belgium, but it worked. I had my budget and everything, and I set it up. But the bigger thing is that it became part of my intellectual property. So as a person out here in Los Angeles, it in some ways became something that, say, for example, now that you have streaming services like Netflix and Hulu eating up whatever property they can find and
Umbrella
develop.
Academy, why not the Casuals?
Why not the Casuals? So you bring this, and hey, here's my intellectual property, and here's it executed in a way.
You essentially are presenting storyboards for a TV show. It
literally is. In fact, it's funny is I went to visit my son a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing keyboards and things like that. And I said, yay, because as an old dad, I'm trying to tell him that I can understand. I was like, this is like me doing the Casuals. He was like, this is not exactly like yours.
Calm down, Dad. Yeah.
Calm down, Dad. So yeah, I mean, all of those things as an entrepreneur, you look for ways. What is the thing that you're doing? Does it provide value? And how can you, extend it or amplify it? By the way, let me go back and tell one little story, by the way, about how this goes. So the Divine Nine sells, right? And I am like hyped like everything else, right? I write the book. And I'm thinking to myself, how can I get a tour? Because, publishers don't give you book tours, right? That's just in the movies, right? And so I think to myself, I'm driving down Crenshaw, literally down the street from where our club is. And I look and I see all of the, this is what power of observation is. Right. All of the Hennessy ads have turned into safe sex ads. And I'm thinking to myself, that's interesting. Then it dawns on me, bingo, they're trying to get the African-American market. Perhaps they would like, to be associated with something in terms of a tour. So I get in contact with Ansel Labs. I send them a brief little email, and they say, I get on the phone, and this woman named Carol Caruza, who I love to death, and I go, hey, I got the idea, 35 HBCU tour. I got the book that no one knows anything about, but they will. And then I will pass out condoms as we go along. And she goes, that is, that's great. Too bad you're not here in Red Hook, to talk about this. And I go, yeah, too bad I'm not. I hang up, and I'm like, oh, hell no. I'll be here Tuesday. Fly out. My editor, who's from New Jersey, she comes, we have lunch, we do a handshake. I think it was $35,000. Enough for me. And I plan out, the whole tour. I pass out, thousands of condoms. But the point wasn't just simply about getting a tour. Again, why are you doing it? Right. The other thing is, as alphas, our whole thing is basically you don't just do things for your own self, you do things for the community. And so what happened was it really played into what our Project Alpha is in terms of, all those for teenagers, this was for college students. This was a way to promote safe sex. Right. And what we came back to was that there was a cluster of HIV outbreaks about a year or two after that. And I started getting emails, and I was like, whoa. And I was getting emails from folks in the Raleigh-Durham Triangle who are saying, thank you for giving me these condoms because I feel safe.
My life. Yeah.
It basically did.
Wow.
Right. And so that's why you always kind of, think about the amplification.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible. I do want to save some time to talk about this new app. Tell us about 365 Ally.
Beautiful.
What it's all about.
So 365 Ally is, again, sparked by kind of this notion of observing. And this is the main thing as an entrepreneur you need to do. You need to constantly observe the world. Right. And then see, if you don't, you're going to always be behind. And so I was observing the fact that, during the George Floyd, tragedy, people were pointing folks toward Black directories, right? And the one thing that I was noticing, and newspapers were coming up with articles, 125 different places to support Black business. And there was this notion.
Well, there was even a day. There was a day where you were supposed to
Of the blackout. Now that
Right,
was actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That was kind of the catalyst, because if you know me, the one thing I'm gonna reiterate this, I can't stand tactics without a strategy, right? The activity is itself not your goal. The goal is the goal. Right. And the blackout itself was one of those things where people did the activity, but you didn't understand what the strategy and what the goal was. And when you make the strategy, when the goal is unclear, then you don't understand whether or not you met it or not. And so I was watching that, and particularly the blackout, and was getting a little frustrated, because I'm thinking to myself, this is something that's going to feel good on one day, but it's not going to feel good, later on. And even all the directories. And I started doing some research, and I recognized that the directories themselves were like the equivalent of having the yellow pages that is dropped off of your porch, right? You don't read that yellow pages, right? You
never take it out of the plastic.
You don't take it out of the plastic. The only thing you do is kind of figure out, do I recycle it or do I throw it in the trash, right?
It's wet, it's nasty, yeah.
Yeah, it has everything that you need to know, but it's not the platform, right? And so I began thinking to myself, at the exact same time, I began thinking to myself, well, the other thing that happens is, as a person who loves Black business, what we do is, unfortunately, I think in 2020, we do something I don't think is what we should be doing. In 2020, we're still thinking like it's 1960 or 1970, meaning that I create this directory just of Black businesses. And my thought process was the most overused word in academia is intersectionality, right? But there's an intersection between marginalized business groups, meaning that Black businesses are down 40% or closed since COVID, right?
Well, they were exposed. Most of them were under the table. They didn't have people on payroll.
People on payroll, under the table, cash businesses by themselves. A lot of times couldn't apply for city grants.
Didn't have their taxes in order.
Yeah, I mean, I joke about here in LA is like, don't mess with some of these businesses, saying that you didn't like the service, because if they're cash businesses, you don't know where that cash is coming from. And if there's some of them like my cousins, right, they'll come on knock at your door. It's like, hey, I heard you got a problem. Like, you don't want those types of problems. Just take your stuff and move on. Yeah. But 40% and like 32% of Latino businesses, are being hurt. And so my thought process was, what is the most effective way of getting marginalized businesses? Two things: a directory that's easy to find, so it's not just a static directory that you have, on a website, and then a marketplace. Because you mean not
like the big book that the fraternity keeps mailing out to us?
Oh, God. Yeah. And that we keep having this to do questions before they threaten us and everything. And I'm like, yo, this is 2020. If I want to call, my thing is like, if I'm in Memphis, give me an app that says, hey, frat is over here, on an app. But I can't, that's beyond my pay grade. But what I decided to do, I wanted to do a combo. And usually I don't do a combo. Usually I'll try to do something that's really focused. But one was a directory. So I'm literally culling the country as much as I possibly can. And just, it's going to be a surface so far until it actually comes about in October. Finding every Black, Latinx, Asian American, Native American, women of color, disabilities, folks with disability, person of color businesses, LGBTQ persons of color businesses, and putting them in an app to where, as allies, because people have multiple, multiple demographics that they're a part of.
Right.
As an ally, you can then focus on what you want to support. And what it also does, particularly for white allies, is that it allows them, because, most of us live in segregated neighborhoods and communities. And if we live in segregated nations and communities, that means you're going to live in segregated business communities. You're not going to see or be exposed to businesses that can give you the products and services that you normally should be able to say, oh, I'm going to choose between A, B, and C. But you're not going to see A, B if you don't live in those neighborhoods. Right. This kind of tears down some of the silos. At least, that's the experiment. And so it will be, I want to let folks know, it's name free. It's a 99 cents per month subscription, and that's partly an anti-racist subscription. Dead serious. One of the things that happens with free things that are focused on minorities is that you get your trolls, right? But racists don't like paying a symbolic amount of money to troll, right? So 99 cents is that just that
racist
point,
tax, yeah.
just that tax that if you're gonna get your troll in, at least I got my 99
You're paying
cents.
for it. Well, yeah,
You're paying for it. So,
exactly.
so it's a mixture of two things. It's a mixture of a directory and an offer up Craigslist type of deal.
And how do people learn? Like, how do they sign up for it right now? Is it live? Does it have a launch date?
Not yet. We're about to hit alpha, and then we're going to go into beta. But if they're interested, if they're either as a user or if they're interested because they have a business, and remember, the business can be I'm on Etsy, or I have a side hustle and I only sell candles. That's perfectly fine. Email me. And of course, because I have the most alpha phi alpha email address on the face of this earth, it's very simple. It will go to the business email address when we get closer to actual launch. And the launch will be mid-October-ish, around there. My coders are still working right now. Mm-hmm. So, but they can email me, alpha1906, ALPHA1906 @gmail.com. And I'll be happy to explain it. And of course, I expect to be back on your show.
You will, because we just can't get it all in one episode, but definitely come back for the launch, and we'll continue the conversation, man. This has been awesome. Thanks for sharing these tips. I think the biggest takeaway for people, entrepreneurs, is just observe the world, or you'll be left behind.
Observe the world, and then also, I would also say, when you do your observation, take advantage of the market research other bigger companies have already done for you. Meaning that if you're going to be, good ideas don't happen in a vacuum. So that's perfectly fine if somebody else has the idea. Look at what they're doing to implement it and how they're marketing, what your idea is. And then think about how you can actually do a twist on that. And then that will probably get you close to your consumer.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thanks, Fred. I appreciate you.
All right, Fred. Hey, I am proud of you. Thank you so much for bringing me on. And we'll chop it up again.
You got it, man. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. To learn more about Peralta Design and our work, go to www.peraltadesign.com and subscribe to keep up with the crew.